Hey, what's going on, Renaissance Lifers? Welcome back to Renaissance Life TV. On today's show, we're talking about why I don't believe in introverts versus extroverts and why I believe it's a myth. Alright guys, so welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, Renaissance Life TV is a channel for men who want to take their lives to the next level. Every week we put out videos on personal growth and a different perspective on navigating life and relationships. Alright guys, let me jump right into it. Introverts versus extroverts is a conversation that's been being had for a long time when it comes to introverts versus extroverts, or INTJs and ENTFs, whatever the classifications may be, and all those types of psychological assessments that are made. And so to a large extent, I just don't really believe in those things, guys. I mean, you're probably gonna think I'm crazy, but I just don't see the real benefit and truth behind them. So, I'm not gonna debate the science behind it, but I will say that I'm a skeptic, right? So when you have psychologists or any type of profession, especially when it's research based, what brings you value as a researcher is to come up with a different type of way of classifying people when it comes to psychology, right? So it's kind of like, I've discovered a way to classify or a way to categorize human beings that applies to everyone. So trying to get everybody to use and incorporate my sort of classification method. And so I think of introverts and extroverts as another one of those schools of thoughts that has been, I think, widely accepted at this point. But I'm going to tell you what my problem is with this classification of introvert versus extrovert. The first thing is, let's say there is a true difference between introverts and extroverts and people who are classified as one or the other. Then what? What's the point? What does that really do for us? So first, who's going to be the one making the classifications? A lot of times, I guess the one benefit of introvert versus extrovert is maybe you classify yourself when I assess myself, I see myself as being more of an introvert than an extrovert. Now, my real sort of qualms with being an introvert versus an extrovert is what are the ramifications down the line? What is the true impact of being labeled as one or another? Does that mean then that if I look at someone and I determine that they're an introvert, then I determine that they can't do one thing or another? To me, what it really comes down to is being able to make judgments about people. And the way that we do that is by labeling people and putting people in a box. So I'm just one of those people who really doesn't like sort of being in a box mindset or being labeled as one thing versus the other. And quite frankly, I really think that nobody is just one thing. And I think in recent years, people have kind of come to acceptance of the fact that, no one is just an introvert or an extrovert, or I guess the way people put it is that they're more of one thing versus another. But I guess my next thought about it, why I really don't like the classifications of being introvert versus extrovert, is how does it really play out in real life? If I think I'm an introvert, can I then say, that means that I'm likely not gonna be able to do a speech, or whatever the stereotypes about introverts are? People use those things in order to keep others in a particular situation. So someone may look at an introvert and be like, well, they wouldn't be able to handle this type of a presentation or something that's in front of people, when of course most people know that that's not necessarily the case. Or somebody may look at an extrovert and be like, well, that person is probably just really loud and obnoxious, when that may not be the case. But it's just a really easy way, I think, that people try to take shortcuts when it comes to dealing with other people. Instead of having to take your time and get to know someone and find out what the person's really about, you can simply say, oh, that person's an extrovert, I know I wouldn't like them, or I know I wouldn't want to hang out with them. Or that person's an introvert, so they probably like no fun, they won't want to go out or anything like that. And I think that's a lot of times what these labels are used for. When maybe a boss knows someone's an introvert, so they wouldn't offer them potentially, certain assignments or certain presentations that might take them out of their comfort zone because they're an introvert. So they're more likely to give it to someone who they believe is an extrovert. The other thing is, I don't really believe that you can tell whether someone's an introvert or an extrovert by looking at them, by really talking to them. That really doesn't tell you what you need to know about a person. And really what you need to know about the person, to me, is that the person is a person and they're multifaceted. So I just hate getting into this place of like, is this person an introvert? Is this person an extrovert? It just really does nothing for me. So how you relate to people based on what's going on, based on the situation, based on the environment. So you may go to one environment and more likely be what's considered extroverted, and go to another environment and be what's considered introverted. So I really think the labels don't really help in that sense either. The other thing I would say, being classified an introvert or an extrovert can sometimes be a crutch, something that people hide behind. So I may say like, oh, I don't want to do this thing because I'm introverted. When in reality, it may just be because you're lazy, right? It may just be because you don't really care about people, you don't like people, and you don't want to take the time to get to know anybody. But your excuse is that I'm just an introvert, so I don't really want to go into crowds or things like that. And I think that's one way that an quote-unquote introvert can hide behind that classification or label. On the other side, maybe somebody who's, considers themselves extroverted, when they say something and people are like, why would you say that? Or like, what? And they're surprised by the person's comment. The person might be like, oh, I'm just really extroverted, so I just say what comes to my mind and things like that. When, maybe that's not the case. Maybe you're not extroverted. Maybe you're just rude, right? So maybe you're not introverted. Maybe you just don't like people. Maybe you're not extroverted. Maybe you're just rude. And that can actually be a reality. So I really just don't really like, the classification, the labels and the boxes, whether it's people putting it on other people or even the person taking it for themselves. So, for those of you who really accept I'm an introvert and this is what defines me in my life, that's great. I think that's fine. But I just wouldn't want to ever be labeled one thing. I never accept in my mind one sort of classification or that I'm generally this way, because that to me is limiting, and that to me is a limiting mindset. I'm all things always, all the time. I can be an introvert this second, an extrovert that second, if you want to use those classifications. But I'm not just one thing, and one thing doesn't define me even generally. You just don't know who I am. I'm just too complex. I'm a human being. And so that's really my issue with these labels and these statements. They're defined and they're not really that movable, whereas as human beings, we're just so vast and varied. The human mind is so complex. How can a term or a label actually encompass what one single human being is? I don't even think we could have the words to really describe what a human being is and what we're capable of. So if you're the person who's been labeled, don't let that define you and don't let that limit you. Don't let other people's labels of you limit you, right? And then if you're a person who's labeled yourself and is okay with that label, don't live in that truth, right? Know that you can be an introvert, you can be an extrovert, you can be all things anytime. And so that's really my thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Is there really such a thing as an introvert and an extrovert? Maybe somebody who has a condition, or somebody who just really has an issue and cannot actually address people. Maybe you would say that person is a hermit or has something else, but I wouldn't even consider that person an introvert per se. Alright guys, so let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As usual, feel free to disagree with me, agree with me, let me know what you think. And of course, I'm wishing you guys, as usual, health and happiness. Until next time, guys, cheers.